Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for clicking on and joining us for another video. Today our topic is going to be humble faith. And those are two key things that are needed in the Christian life. And when we put them together, that's really when we can see a move of God and see things start to happen and turn in our favor. So, to illustrate this topic, we're going to be reading out of Mark 7, verses 24 through 30. And in this portion of the Bible, we see that Jesus is casting a demon out of a Gentile woman's daughter. And we'll talk a little bit further in the video about why this was such a taboo thing and why this is really something that required a lot of humility on behalf of the person who was asking. So we're going to be looking at that, and we're going to go ahead and jump in and read verses 24 through 30. I'm going to be reading from the CSB version, the Christian Standard Bible. Feel free to follow along. It should be displayed upon your screen, or you can feel free to read in a different version if you prefer. So let's go ahead and start and read. So, verse 24, he got up and departed from there to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, but he could not escape notice. Instead, immediately after hearing about him, a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Gentile, a Syro-Phoenician by birth, and was asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she replied to him, "Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he told her, "Because of this reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." When she went back to her house, she found her child lying on the bed, and the demon was gone. So I have just read Mark 7, verses 24 through 30. And I think that this is a very great picture of how to live a life of humble faith. And she gave a very great example about how we can display it in our own lives. So let's walk through and talk about it a bit more. So we see in verse 24, Jesus has just arrived to this region of Tyre. So in Tyre is a place where a lot of Gentile people were living. And already this was unusual for Jesus, a Jewish man, to be going to this place, because Jews and Gentiles did not coalesce with each other. They did not get along. It was just very unnatural and uncommon. And the Jews actually really saw the Gentiles as being unclean people, so they would not associate with those Gentiles. But Jesus, being somebody who went against the rules of normality, he did not care about this and went on anyway. And he did not follow what everybody else thought was law. So he enters a house and does not want anyone to notice him, but he could not escape notice. And immediately the woman sees him and is asking for him to come and deliver her daughter out of from the spirit that is plaguing her. So we see that Jesus comes and he doesn't want to be seen. And why would he not want to be seen? So while, as I said earlier, he's in a place where Gentiles are, and he's not afraid of causing a scandal. He's not fearful of what people think of him. We know that. But Jesus knows that there's always going to be a time and a place where people need to know something and when they don't. So he's coming to do something, and he knows that if a lot of people know that he's here in this place causing a disruption, it's going to disrupt his ministry, and it's going to prevent him from being able to go out and do all the things that he wants to do. So he keeps it quiet. And I just thought already this is showing an act of humility from Jesus. He is living a life of humility, and we are called to do that as well. Because when the world always tells us, when you're doing something and it's scandalous and it's something that goes against what people usually think, we are really tell people to broadcast that to the world so that people can see you and see how you're doing something different and how you're changing things and breaking rules and all of that. And they really want to broadcast that to the world. But we see Jesus' example. He is not doing that. He's come here for a specific purpose, and he's not going to allow anything to get in the way of that. So a lot of times humility can just be a moment where you decide to be quiet, and where you decide that you're not going to make sure that everybody knows what you're doing and why you're there. You're there to do your thing, and you don't need everyone to understand that. So And we also see that Jesus, this is coming after a time where Jesus has gone and he's given food to over 5,000 people. He's walked on water. He's healed many different people, but he's not trying to exalt himself. We see the woman, she comes to him. She she comes after hearing about him. She came to him and fell at his feet. He didn't go to the woman and tell her, "You should come and you should worship me because I'm so good." The woman just knew because she had heard about him. Because true power does not need to be talked up about. You know, I have never met the president of the United States, but when I see the fleet of his vehicles, or when I hear about his name, I know that he's a powerful man, and he doesn't have to say that about himself. I know that because he's in a position of power and because of what I've heard. The woman heard about Jesus and knew of his power, and Jesus was able to live humbly and did not need to broadcast that about himself. So we are called to do the same. Humility, it basically means you think more of others than yourself and you're not trying to exalt yourself. And this does not mean that you're out here not taking care of yourself or not thinking of yourself well and you don't have self-confidence. It just means that you have a proper view of yourself. Because when we have proper view of ourselves, we automatically go into this place of humility. So we see this lady here, and she's in verse 25, she's falling at the feet of Jesus because she sees Jesus, this holy and blameless man, and she knows who he is already. And that already puts her into proper position to be humble before him. When we are not fixing our eyes on who Jesus really is, that means that we're putting our eyes somewhere else. Somewhere else that's making us believe that we need to have a bigger head than we should. But when we have our eyes on the proper place, we fall at the feet of Jesus, just as this woman has, and we stay in this place of humility. So another great reminder of living this humble life is Micah 6 verse 8, one of my favorite verses, and I'll paraphrase it a little bit. The three things that Jesus tells us to do is to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God. A lot of the things that God tells us to do are simple, but they're not easy, because all throughout your life, there's going to be things that go against these commands. And it's very tempting to follow that instead of what we're doing, instead of what we've been commanded to do. But there's always going to be reward when we follow the commands of the Lord. So she notices his true power and she asks him for help. And already we see that this woman has a great measure of faith. And this would be very unusual. She's a Gentile woman. She has not grown up learning about Jesus and learning about the prophets and all of the Psalms and all of those things like people of the Jewish faith would have. All she has is what she has heard from others. So we saw in verse 25, she heard about him. She heard about him and decided to go and seek after him. So we know that faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So she heard of Jesus and decided to put her faith into him. And this shows how much more we should have faith. So I don't know that this woman had access to the word of God or not, but I know that we as children of God, we have access to it today. So we know that faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So all she was able to do was depend upon what she heard. But we can take it a step further and hear even more by going to the word of God and getting a greater measure of faith. So we really can follow her example and decide to listen to the words of God and truly believe them and see things come to pass in our lives. Okay, so we pick up in verse 27, and we see Jesus telling the Gentile woman, "Let the children be fed first, because it isn't right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." So what does this mean? Jesus' ministry was originally supposed to be, was supposed to be for the Jews, his earthly ministry there. It was not meant to be for the Gentiles at that time. Now, this does not mean that Jesus does not care about the Gentiles. He just knows that there's going to be a different time for them. So he tells this to the woman basically in kind of a parable form, basically saying that his children must be fed first. and it isn't right to throw the bread to the dogs. And the woman responds saying, Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. So this is a very humble response, because in verse 27, Jesus is basically calling her a dog. And I know a lot of people, if they were called a dog, they would not respond in a humble way. They would be angry. They would say, how dare you say this to me? I can't believe you said this. Um, I'm better than this, whatever. But the woman, she is again showing her humility and saying, and just accepting this, because she sees already that she does not deserve anything from Jesus. She has proper view of herself, and she sees that, in this time she is a Gentile, and before Jesus goes to sacrifice on the cross for us, at this time only the Israelites and the Jews are only people who are seen as God's people. The Gentiles are not seen as God's people at this time. So she, at this time, she sees what her position is, and so she responds humbly. And she was basically saying, can I just have the scraps? Like, I'm not trying to detract you from your mission. I'm not trying to tell you that you have to change what you're here for, but can I have a piece of it? Can I? And she's persistent in that. And so I thought of this in terms of my dog. So I have a little Shih Tzu, and every time that I eat a meal, she's there under the table looking at me, trying to get any little bit of crumb that I drop on the floor. And so when you think of this is a very humble position. And she is very persistent. She comes every single time that I have food. She comes and she sits at my feet and she wants to get even just a crumb of what I have. And there are the ways that she responds to me in this time really affect whether or not I'm going to give her some food. So if she comes and she's just sitting, she's not making a noise, she's just keeping her eyes on me, and she's just being patient, I'm probably going to give her some food. But if she does, like she does a lot of the time, and comes and jumps on my leg or whines at me or even just gives up and goes away, I'm probably not giving her any food. So this woman, she is responding in a way of she's just coming to sit at Jesus's feet. She's not complaining. She's not she's not giving up, and she's not demanding from him. She's just coming and she's persistent in her request and just asking for some humility. And she's just asking for a handout from Jesus. So we see in verse 29, he says to her, because of this reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. So she was able to have deliverance for her daughter based upon her response and her attitude. It mattered how she responded to Jesus. Because if she had responded in a way of, how dare you? How dare you do this? I deserve this. That wouldn't have gone well for her, and very likely her daughter would not have been delivered because she didn't respond in a way of humility. So, and this is really the attitude that the Pharisees had. They believed that because they had a lot of knowledge of the word and they had a lot of knowledge of what they thought Jesus should do and who he should be, that they would get all the things that they wanted. They thought that their religion was going to take them farther than anything else. They thought that knowledge was the way to get everything. But we see from this woman's response that humble faith will always take you farther than any kind of legalistic religion ever will. We have to be aware of our place when we come before God and be humble before him. Another one of my favorite verses that I think goes along with this is James 4:6. And the latter part of this says, God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. Now, grace is getting something that you do not deserve. And this woman's request was granted because she was in a place of humility. So she was given grace. And she got something that in this context and in this time, she did not deserve. Because in this time, she is not seen as one of God's people. She is just a Gentile woman. But she's given grace, and her daughter is delivered because of that. So to close this out, really, I just want you guys to seek to humble yourself before you are humbled. We often find ways to make ourselves look bigger and larger all the time. Nobody really has to tell you to have pride. That's not, we won't see in the Bible um, how to have pride. It's already there. And so because pride is always there, we will always have to bring it down. We always take it off of us. And we have to seek ways to humble ourselves, because if we don't, we will be humbled. When you puff yourself up high, the fall is going to hurt a lot worse than if you were at a lower position. So, kind of an explanation of this. If I were to fall off of the top of the Empire State Building, that's going to hurt a lot more than if I fall off of a curb. So, make a decision of where you want to be. Make a decision of what position you will put yourself in, because it will determine what outcome you have in this life. And a great reminder, keep your eyes fixed on Jesus and you will never feel like you're better than others. When you have your eyes fixed on Jesus, you see that you will never measure up to who he is. So you will always be in right position. So keep your eyes on him and do not. And when you usually a sign that you are being proud is that you're comparing yourself with other people. When you're comparing yourself with other people, you don't have your eyes in the right place. And that's where pride has an easy way to come in. And the easy fix is just to turn your eyes back to Jesus, and you will see where you truly are. So our reflection question today is going to be, how will you keep an attitude of humility in your daily life? And feel free to put that down in the comments or talk about this amongst your own family and friends. And leave me any comments or suggestions below. And I really appreciate you guys watching this video. Please let me know if you guys would have any particular topics that you'd like me to speak about. And I appreciate your time. Thanks. Bye.